Grant Smith.
Let me just grab some water and I'll get started. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Division 17 and the Division 17 Fellows Committee for this honor. Like a lot of queer kids, growing up, adolescence was not an easy time for me. I grew up outside of Dallas, Texas, the home of the Dallas Cowboys, as an unathletic gay kid who hated football. As a result, I was lonely, I was depressed, I was suicidal. The social environment was very clear about what was acceptable: hegemonic masculinity, compulsory heterosexuality. And these negative social contexts still impact queer kids today. As we know from a wealth of research, lesbian, gay, bisexual youth are more likely than their heterosexual peers to experience suicidal ideation and to attempt suicide. And those LGBT youth who are in unsupportive environments are even more likely to attempt suicide. But as we know from the work of many of our counseling psychology colleagues, many of whom are in this room today, lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and trans individuals are amazingly resilient. And sometimes that resilience comes in some unexpected places. For me, that resilience emerged when I discovered a group of teenagers with dyed hair, spikes on their leather jackets, and boys and girls with heavy eyeliner. They introduced me to the punk and post-punk movements. They introduced me to the Sex Pistols and their critique of the monarchy and England's treatment of the working class. I found the feminist rallying cry of "Oh bondage, up yours" by X-Ray Specs. David Bowie and Robert Smith of The Cure showed me how to reject gender dichotomies. And my very first crush, Morrissey of the Smiths, introduced me to the concept of diverse sexualities beyond just gay and heterosexual. These artists' words were subversive. They challenged the status quo of heteronormativity, gender rigidity, capitalism. And moreover, in this subversive space, I found a community. A community of kids who, like me, didn't fit the restrictive norms of the time. In this community, I was able to resist, to no longer cower against the bullies, to find my own voice. When I discovered psychology as an undergraduate, I was able to integrate the tools of research into my efforts to resist these oppressive contexts. Laura King, a personality psychologist, saw something in me and took me under her wing. She introduced me to research. She told me to be a statistics minor, which I did, probably to the chagrin of some of my students. She brought psychology and research alive for me, and she affirmed me as a young gay man. Together, we explored the ways in which LGBT adults abandon socially ingrained and heteronormative ideas of what a good life is supposed to be. We found that when people were able to see themselves living their lives authentically as queer people, they were happier. And seeing how I could use psychology to further subvert social restrictions thrilled and inspired me. And what's more, as an undergrad, I started to find a community of colleagues and friends. People, these two, who would go on to become psychologists in various subdisciplines and who would remain important fixtures in my life for decades. Ann Wheeler, Jennifer Eels, and I all graduated from Southern Methodist University in the early 90s. Ann's now a school psychologist, and Jen is a social personality psychologist. And though we've seen each other many times over our 20 years of friendship, this is the first APA conference we've been together since 2002, and I'm thrilled that they're both here with me. At the end of my undergraduate career, I applied to grad school and was privileged to be able to work with Kathy Ingram. She took a chance on me and was instrumental in my continuing development as a researcher. She encouraged me to develop my own program of research, one that would be meaningful to me, one that could help me to resist systems of oppression. Her mentorship launched my career as a researcher, examining the ways in which LGBTQ individuals are impacted by their environments. In addition, grad school helped me to understand my privilege, how even though I desperately needed a community in order to thrive, I had been given many advantages, and those had made it much easier for me. As a result, I committed myself to social justice efforts, to continue to subvert and resist the prevailing paradigm of white supremacy, patriarchy, classism, and other forces of inequity. But while I learned a great deal in graduate school, I felt some of those familiar feelings of alienation and marginalization. Luckily, once again, punk was there for me. I found an amazing community of friends outside my academic setting. My days were spent seeing clients, taking classes, doing my research, often taking together multiple pieces of paper, taping them together to make big correlation matrices. But my nights were spent at punk shows and drag shows. These outlets were as important to me then as they were when I was a struggling teenager. At my lowest point in grad school, when I was seriously considering dropping out and running away to New York City, like so many of my punk idols, we were assigned in class to read Rosie Philip Bingham's SCP presidential address. Her words hit me as strongly as those that I had read on cassette liners while listening to tapes sitting in my childhood bedroom. She said, "Exclusion is easier, but inclusion is better." He drew a circle and left me out. I drew a bigger circle and included him in. So my subtext is, draw the circle bigger. Such a simple message, but so powerful. With so many forces aiming to exclude, we must resist. We must include. We must draw the circle bigger. Rosie's words and the support of my friends allowed me to finish grad school and start my academic career. After grad school, I made a concerted effort to get involved in Division 17. I was seeking a community, and I found one. And as I interacted more and more with counseling psychology and with Division 17, what became clear to me is that our work is subversive. We resist the forces of Islamophobia, xenophobia, racism, homophobia, and others that aim to oppress and marginalize. As an adolescent, the punk and post-punk movements woke me up. They inspired me, they liberated me, they gave me a home, just as counseling psychology continues to do so for me today. My hope is that my work and the work of my students continues to serve as forces of subversion and resistance. For example, together, we're examining the resilience of trans individuals in the face of suicidality. We're looking at issues of sexual minority identity, and we're developing ways to prevent HIV risk. Overall, my work aims to document the impacts of oppression on sexual and gender minorities, highlight the many strengths of this community, and develop interventions to promote their resilience. Given that we can still be fired for our sexual orientation or our gender identity, that we face multiple health disparities, that trans women of color are being murdered, we must resist. Marriage is great, but we still have so much more work to do. I'm thankful that I found a community that allows me to do this work, and that the members of this community do such important work that has made a huge impact on me and on the world. And I want to thank a few members of this community for their support over the years. Thanks to my colleagues from TWU, Linda Rubin, Sally Stabb, Roberta Nutt, and especially Deborah Mullen, who started this, Deborah, who started this journey with me as a faculty member. Thanks to my many friends and colleagues and mentors in the field, John Robinson, Glenda Russell, and Tanya Israel. A special shout out to Tanya, whose Buffy the Vampire Slayer Woman of the Year speech inspired me to share with you all the important role that the punk and post-punk movements have made in my life. Tanya, I still have my steak. Thank you to my colleagues from McGill, especially Lisa Spanierman and Tara Flanagan, and my colleagues now at the University of Houston, especially Nikki Coleman, with whom I was on an internship at the University of Maryland. I'm now happy to work with both her and Roberta Nutt at my current job. And I want to thank my students who continue to challenge and inspire me and remind me why I continue to do the work I do. Thank you to all my current doctoral students who are pictured here, as well as the many students who have volunteered in my lab over the years. And finally, a huge thank you to my fiance and partner of almost 10 years, Matthew Rooney. He always pushes me to think bigger and broader. He has endless confidence in me. He shares my same values and fights for them daily, and he always makes me laugh. And I'd like to finish with a couple lines from the Julie Ruin. In the end, we made tiny islands where we didn't always have to be afraid. And an X will forever mark the spot where we decided we had had just about enough. Thank you to the field of counseling psychology for being one of my tiny islands. And in this time of Orlando and continued violence against Black and brown lives, we must continue to resist, to say enough, to liberate our clients, our communities, our students, and to create a community where no one is afraid. Thank you.